Hi. Got it. Okay. Hi, I'm Erin Fiorito, you guys. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the presentation. And I will say a few things just really briefly. I cannot see you guys at all. So if anybody has something to add or say, please speak up or put it in the chat, or maybe Renee or Kara could help me out. I'm also going to talk about this topic at a rapid pace. This, like Renee nicely said, engagement in the MST program is something that we focus very, very heavily on and have a lot of training materials on and work closely with our therapists to address. And so this is a huge topic for us. So cramming it into 15 minutes is a challenge, and I'm going to do my best. So if I'm talking really quickly, it's a combination of, it's a lot to say and a lot of coffee. So can you guys see the screen all right? Is it in the right mode? Somebody let me know.
Yes.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, so we're going to talk about engaging, as I said, families or difficult to reach families, right? So that's the place I'm going to anchor from today, is that these are the families that historically over time, over many system providers have had some challenges in, meeting with providers or, engaging in the treatment process. Okay. So just to say that off the bat. Before we kind of get into this topic of engagement, I'm going to spend just a moment talking about what multisystemic therapy, or MST, is. For those people that don't know, and I'll be very brief, but it is a community-based, family-driven treatment, and we target youth who are experiencing delinquent or externalizing behaviors in the home, school, and community. These are kids between the ages of 12 and 17, and the issues that they're having are across multiple systems. So we're working with youth that have many challenges across the board, and our approach is really family driven, right? So we deliver our treatment within the context of the family, with the partnership of the family, within the context of their own values, religion, culture. And we really try to engage the entire ecology. So I want to say that before I jump into talking about engagement, because it really does, it's very reflected in our approach, that our goal is to engage the full ecology of the youth, all the systems involved. And you'll hear this today in the next 15 minutes, that we also really focus primarily on empowering caregivers, right? So, not just MST is this a goal. I'm sure in many of our programs and services that we offer, we aim to empower the caregivers so that they can work with their children and that change is sustainable over time. So my question for everyone, and feel free to say something or put it in the chat, but when you hear this word engagement, we ask that question, what is engagement? What are words or phrases that come to mind just in 30 seconds? Does anyone have something they would say?
Showing up.
Showing up.
Connection.
Connection, yep.
Effort.
Effort.
Communication.
Great.
Erin, we have some responses in the chat. Report building, participation, respectful, voice,
Perfect.
active participation, trust, and meeting where they're at.
Ooh, I love all of those. Great. Okay. Thank you guys. Yes. So all of the above, and I guess, I created this training and I chose this picture of the high five, but to me, that's what I think of when I think of engagement. All of those things that you said, we're working together. It's a team effort between the provider and the family. It's active, it's ongoing, right? From an MST perspective, this is really, this quote here, this is from the founders of MST, and people created this treatment service, but really we address engagement from this standpoint that without engagement with the family, without, this active participation in the treatment process, we can't achieve positive outcomes with our families. And we may, as therapists and service providers, have fabulous and really well-researched intervention ideas to bring to the table. And really without that engagement and that family alignment, we're not going to get very far. So building off of that, before we get into strategies, we do in MST with all of our therapists, and MST is a program that's implemented internationally. So this is the same whether it's here in the United States, in Chile, in Norway. This is the same assumptions that we operate under. But we do believe that accountability for engagement rests on the therapist or the provider. So if we're having a family that, to use what somebody said just recently, doesn't show up, right? They're not coming to session, or they're not home when we get there. Our first focus is going to be on ourselves and what can we do differently, and how can we work, another way to engage this family. So the accountability to problem solve and figure this out rests on us. And some of these we've already hit on in the short 5 minutes we've been talking, but we really assume that the treatment goals we develop are defined by our caregivers. So in MST, we start out with our initial assessment, and we gather what we call the desired outcomes of the caregiver. So what do they want to see? And, it doesn't have to be in clinical terms. It could be, I don't want my kid to yell at me anymore. I want respect in this home, or I want to, fighting to stop. And then we frame our treatment goals, to reflect those words by the caregiver, right? So we make sure that they are a part of the goal development, and we do have that shared agenda. Again, we see engagement as a solvable problem most of the time, right? I was an MST therapist and supervisor and experienced this firsthand. And, we're very persistent on how can we frame this in new ways so that we can engage this family, and we can, get them on board and do whatever we need to do to solve this problem. And we'll talk about our strength focus in a moment, but we really do operate from the standpoint that families and clients are doing the best that they can. We do avoid blaming clients and families, of course, as all of you guys can attest to that. And we don't use the word in MST resistant. We really avoid that, because truly it doesn't allow us to problem solve from a stance that we want to. So we try very hard to continue to maintain that strength focus, even when engagement challenges are very, very high. And as somebody else mentioned, engagement for us is ongoing, right? This isn't something you do on session one only. It ebbs and flows, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. And it's a process that we implement ongoing throughout treatment. So to begin, of course, if you're experiencing this with the family, if you're experiencing challenges with engagement or in a difficult to reach family, what does that actually look like, right? So we know what it kind of looks like when our clients are engaged. They are showing up, they are, invested, they're present, right? They're, doing the things that we're suggesting. So on the flip side, if our families are not engaged or our clients are not engaged, they might be missing sessions. They might be saying, hey, sure, this sounds great. We'll try this plan. You leave, you come back, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't get to it, right? So there's not progress being made. And that's one of the more subtle ways to identify an engagement challenge with a family. So moving into strategies in MST, once we really have identified that, yeah, engagement's a struggle, right? We're not meeting with our families, whatever it might be. We use our same problem-solving process that we use with any other referral behavior to assess. So back to the therapist being accountable, we will bring it to the table, and we'll use what we call a fit circle, which is here on this slide, to really think about, what are the contributing factors to the lack of engagement with this family, right? Is the caregiver hopeless? Has the caregiver maybe not experienced success before when it comes to implementing new strategies with their family? Do they not have the supports that they need to run the interventions? Or are the drivers more related to us? Sometimes as service providers, we get a little burnt out, we get a little frustrated. Maybe we weren't clear enough when we discussed what treatment was going to look like. So really doing that full analysis first before moving into strategies, and you can apply that to, any referrals, issues, and behaviors, so you can apply that to engagement. So there's just quickly, I'll run through a couple of strategies. And again, we're just scratching the surface on these ideas. So I appreciate you guys hanging with me. But of course, the strength-focused approach, and I know that that's an approach that many programs use, not just MST, but this is one of our principles and a cornerstone for us. The idea that we really make a strategic effort to highlight the strengths of our clients and families and the ecology. We can be thinking through what are the strengths of the school and their community and their neighborhood and their church, right? We're really, looking at the full picture and trying to set that tone for families and having a genuine focus on strengths, right? And I think that's key. We're not trying to sugarcoat something or be overly positive, but building from the strengths that already exist in a family is such a nice way to kind of meet them where they are, as somebody said earlier. Going back to the basics, using our skills we learned, just people skills, right? Reflective listening. So doing our best if we hit this moment where a family is not engaged with us, maybe they're still meeting with us, but maybe our treatment goals aren't the same. Taking that time to really convey this acceptance and understanding and support as a way to see, okay, where are they? Here I am on these goals. You guys are somewhere else. Let's see how we got to this place. And reflective listening is a great strategy when, when in doubt, just go this route that rhymed. And, it might help you, move forward in conversations with your families or clients, right? Again, back to the basics with empathy. Of course, we know empathy is useful in any relationship with the human, right? But when we're hitting this point and a family is not engaged, I think this becomes difficult. And it did for me as a therapist when I'm a little frustrated or I feel like I've done everything I can to engage this family and it's not working. Using this empathy again in a strategic way. So understanding the functionality of their behavior, right? If we have a family who's not showing up, what could that be about? Could they feel like maybe they don't trust us? Have they had bad relationships with service providers? Do they feel blamed, right? I have an example where I got some feedback from a family once that they were feeling offended by how often I looked at my watch during session. No idea that I was doing that, but it really was quite a turnoff for them. And I'm glad that they shared that with me because it impacted our engagement, right? So thinking about the functionality of behavior, using non-clinical time, and we'll talk about that again in a minute, but it's okay to kind of take your clinical hat off and just get to know people and spend some time learning about them as a person rather than pushing our clinical goals. And as in MST, we have very structured treatment plans that we're trying to get done in a short time with families. So it's very easy for us to push our clinical agenda and skip over that step. And so thinking about that strategically, how you can use just that non-clinical time is a great skill. Also being aware of our own negative bias. It happens that we do develop thoughts that maybe aren't as positive about a family. And how can we have self-awareness about that and then shift our perspective a little bit if it's getting in the way of us being able to have empathy for a family in this situation. I always tell the teams that I work with that we are really the hope holders for our families. So a lot of times with these multi-problem families, we're coming in and we're not the first service provider. This is not their first time through this type of program, and they're tired and they're exhausted and they may be hopeless. And we do often come in with that energy and that strength focus, and hopefully that's not off-putting, but to say, hey, look, like you're here, you are doing this, really positively reinforcing small steps and small change to help them see that, maybe hope is here. We also normalize for a lot of our families. And I feel lucky in MST because we have years of research and many countries that implement MST to be able to say, hey, look, you're not the first family to go through this and not the first family that could have success in this program. And however you generalize that to the programs you all work in, I do think normalizing things for people is something we can overlook as something very simple, but it can be incredibly powerful. So normalizing for your family is that this is tough and you're not alone and we're going to go through this together, right? Again, back to basics with reframing, but this is another nice cognitive tool to be able to say, hey, look, let's shift our perspective. That might get a family to think about things a little differently. If they're not wanting to meet with you or not wanting to try things, is there a way that we can provide alternative frames of reference for families, right? And the scenarios that this could apply to are very vast and across the board. But we use this quite a bit in MST to really shift perspectives that the caregivers bring to the table in a way to try to get more momentum. Again, when in doubt, use your interpersonal human skills to really show some genuine warmth, authenticity with our families. What feels comfortable and appropriate for you. It's, I think, easy for us to forget to do this, especially when a family's not wanting to meet and we're frustrated and we've got a lot on our agenda. But this is just a great reminder for that. I like to prepare families for their own disengagement. So we know through research over time that engagement does ebb and flow throughout our treatment, right? And especially as things get more challenging. So in MST, we always tell families it tends to get worse before it gets better, especially when we're trying something new or different. And so preparing them and predicting for that, disengagement to kind of dip or engagement to dip can really be helpful to circle back. Hey, we knew this was going to happen, right? This is pretty normal in the treatment process. What can we do to problem solve this now? We see this in every single family we work with, that there are periods of disengagement and we kind of have to roll with that. And so being able to predict it up front when everything's okay can sometimes be pretty helpful. And again, for us, as I said, we're a very family-focused treatment, and we do engage the entire ecology. So for programs that is a focus, really, a strategy for maintaining engagement can be that, we're working to maintain this focus with the family versus the child. And the way that we see this happen often is, if you come out for a family session and we've got a caregiver who might be talking negatively about a youth, as a provider, it's so easy to align right then with the youth and say, oh man, let's see if we don't want to say those things about the kid right in front of the kid. And it creates an alliance without even realizing that that's happened. And so being able to engage that caregiver first, maybe separately from the youth, or finding a way to kind of build that relationship with them initially, can really help down the road when you're trying to engage the entire family in whatever intervention it might be. Another, thing we do in MST very planfully is harnessing the family supports. So we have tools that off the bat really try to find, from a strengths-based focus, who in this family, who in this ecology can support us during this time, right? So when engagement does dip, or when things do get hard, or when they don't show up, are there others we can tap into to help so that treatment doesn't just fall apart when a caregiver disengages? As we kind of discussed, there are non-clinical strategies too, of course, that we can use, like we talked about, just in general, having casual conversations with your families, trying to build that relationship up, but really being strategic about looking at family photos. If you're a community-based worker and you're in the home, I would say, oh, I see that's a cute photo on your phone. Who is that, right? We're trying to just build up that relationship. Often in MSC, we do use food, whether that's with a kid, bringing them a bag of baked Lay's. We did that this week with a kiddo, or bringing a pizza out. Hey, this family is really struggling to make time for our session. Can we bring a pizza out for dinner and talk, right? We're not going to do that all the time every week, but it's a way to get our foot in the door, as we say, to really kind of use those strategies we just talked about to build up engagement, build up a relationship. And lastly, those 5-minute sessions, I think I make that recommendation pretty much weekly, because we do struggle with engagement with a lot of our families, to say, hey, look, let me just pop out and say hi, check in on you. I won't stay more than 5 minutes, and then sticking to that. We want to be respectful of our family's time. And again, even though that's not going to help us get our agenda done, it's definitely not going to help our billable productivity numbers, but it's a way to say, hey, look, I'm going to follow through on what I said. I really just do want to check on you. And maybe we can set another time to meet. So that was, we could go into depth on many of those topics. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to talk further, but that is really kind of the nuts and bolts for us on how we approach engagement across the board, like I said, with many of our cases. So I don't know, Renee, if there are time for questions, or if anybody has any before I close.
Yeah,